Good evening. Are we all here? We're all getting situated. I hope everyone had a snack, some tea, something in the back. Feel free at any point to go get a snack. I might do that after these intro. Just wanted to welcome everyone. I'm Brent Blackaby, the council member up here for District 6, North Berkeley Hills. Thank you, good to see you. It's really great to see all of you here tonight because I know we all share an interest in this topic, which is how do we make our community more wildfire resilient and safe. If you're like me, I know we're all starting to think a lot more about what we each can do at our own home, in our own neighborhood to do the vegetation management, zone zero, home hardening, all of the stuff that we've been working on the last couple of years, but obviously we're being asked to step up even more. And one of the first questions that Lori and I get and our office gets is, well, that's great. I'm glad we're being asked to do more, but what about everybody else? What's everybody else doing? What are our neighbors doing? What are our other partners doing? What's happening in Tilden Park? And we said, that's a really great question. They're doing a ton. And it's really important that we all know what they're doing because it also makes us all feel better about what we're doing. Because we really are in this together. It's a collaborative effort. We know that what happens in the park is integral to what's going to happen in the case of a fire for us. And what we do is also going to really help us. And so let's have a conversation. And that's really what tonight is all about. So special thanks to Assistant Chief McIntyre and Captain Neville for taking the time out of their evening to join us tonight. They're going to explain in a minute the current and upcoming vegetation mitigation work that's taking place in the park system, especially in Tilden, because that affects us in a very direct way. And this is really something that's been organized by our Firewise Communities. And so just wanted to call out Jen Braun, if Jen is here. There's Jen. Jen also came in and talked to Lori and said, I'd really love to hear what's going on in Tilden. And we said, that's a fantastic idea. Let's make it happen. And we've got such a great network of Firewise Communities up here. Michelle and so many people have organized this team of leaders. And actually, would be great maybe just to recognize that. So the Berkeley Woods folks, if you're from the Berkeley Woods group, there's Jen. Park Hills, are there Park Hills folks? There's some Park Hills folks. Creston Firewise, there's Creston. We're not counting, we're not giving you any extra credit. Glam Pack, there's some Glam Pack. Grizzly Pack. Okay. The Grizzlies. North Keeler Grizzly, that's our group. Okay, good. Haas, H-A-A-S-S, right there. And then Red Tail Ridge in Kensington. Perfect, awesome. And anybody else I missed? That's a good strategy. That's a really good strategy. Anyway, so thank you all for being here. This is really an opportunity for all of us to inform ourselves and then also inform our neighbors. As we learn, we can communicate with our neighbors about what's going on and really improve and increase the collaboration that we're all doing together and also with our friends at the Park District, with the Berkeley Fire Safe Council. Members of the Fire Safe Council are here tonight as well. Thank you for being here, and our office. So with that, a couple of other thank yous. So thanks to Jen Braun. Thanks to Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, Pastor Claire, for letting us use this space. There's a donation jar on the back. Feel free to leave a donation. Thank them for letting us use the space. There's also a sign-up sheet for our office email list back there. If you need to use the restrooms, they're out and down, right, Lori? So if there's a restroom need, it's down, outside, and around. Sam Ariola, thank you for doing our tech tonight. Thank you very much. Jeanette Wallen for the building management and letting us into the space. Thank you, Jeanette. Nick Galikowski, who's the council president here with the church. I don't know if Nick is here, but thank you, Nick. Thank you to Berkeley Community Media for recording this, because we can then share this as well with the neighbors. And thank you to Assistant Chief Colin Arnold, who's snacking down on cookies back there. Well, I can attest, I just saw Colin yesterday. This is really great. So Chief Arnold and some of the interns and some of the scientists at UC Berkeley have been conducting our own field experiments in Richmond about what happens with vegetation alongside a home. Does it provide any shielding benefit? And they ran a series of experiments over the last 2 or 3 days. So Colin was doing one of the favorite things he does, which is light things on fire and then see what happens. So I was with them a little bit yesterday, and they've been measuring the sign. Anyway, so they're going to have more data that they can also share in the weeks to come from those experiments, which I think is terrific. With that, agenda-wise, we'll have a short presentation from the Park District, and then we'll take some questions, and really just to have an understanding about what they're doing. If you have any other Berkeley kind of specific questions, Colin and I are happy to take those afterwards, but we really want to focus as much as we can on hearing from the folks of the park. With that, I want to introduce my friend, Elizabeth Echols. She is our Ward 1 board member for the Park District. And Elizabeth is here to talk a little bit about the district and then also introduce our special guests. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to see all of you here tonight. Thank you to our Firewise Communities and our Fire Safe Council. I live over in Park Hills, so I am one of your neighbors, and I appreciate everything that we all are doing, let's just say. But and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight because I think it's important to understand what the Park District is doing, not just to make you feel better about what you're doing, but also hopefully make you feel better about what we're doing too. Because as you'll see, this team, we're small but mighty. We really are extremely strategic about what we do and the areas that we treat and how we do it. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. But I also want to just say that, you know, since joining the board almost 6 years ago, fire protection, prevention, protecting our neighbors, our visitors, our staff, the wildlife, you know, really everybody from catastrophic fire has been my highest priority. And I'm pleased to say that we have been able to increase our funding substantially, mostly through grants and also the voter-approved measures that we have. You know, in the next 3 years, we're planning to spend nearly $11 million on fuels reduction work, and quite a lot of that in Tilden Park, 39 acres here in Tilden. So that is important. And we've also spent a lot more. The spending itself has increased quite a bit on being able to do this fire prevention work. We've also increased staff. The fuels management staff has increased by about 200% in the last, since in the last 6 years. So we really are focused on what we need to do. Now that said, we manage a really ginormous area. You know, I mean, my ward alone extends from the Berkeley-Emeryville border all the way up through Pinole, so all of those cities in between. And altogether, it is all of Alameda County and Contra Costa County and over 126,000 acres that we manage in parkland. But the good news is this team is super strategic, and we definitely have seen that by doing the prevention work and also being able to have a quick suppression efforts if there is a fire, that has proven to be a very effective strategy. And I just want to, you know, it's hard. We don't know what could have happened or would have happened, but I do want to say that there have been a few examples where the conditions were such that we could have had a catastrophic fire and didn't. And one of those was just a few years ago up on Ajax Place in Grizzly Peak. There was a fire that started during that really horrible time in October with the Tubbs fire and the Diablo winds and the hot, dry weather, just the worst possible conditions. And fortunately, we had just done fuels reduction work in that area, and we were also able to get to the scene very quickly, along with others, because we do have mutual aid agreements with local fire departments and with CAL FIRE, and get that fire out, keep it small. Similarly, just last summer in July, there were several fires. One that started along Grizzly Peak in Berkeley, and then a couple others, Redwood Road in Oakland, and that was during that really hot, right around July 4th of 2024, very hot, dry weather, again, catastrophic weather. We were able to get those tamped out very quickly, in part because of the fuels reduction work. And so, you know, it's not perfect, but I do want to say that, you know, the funding that we have, we are stretching it to its maximum limit through the strategy. We absolutely prioritize that wildland urban interface, and really, you know, it is our highest priority to keep all of you safe and our visitors and staff as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to the experts who are leading this work, and they have a really informative slide presentation for you this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Blackaby and Director Echols, for the very wonderful introduction. And I just want to say that as a acting assistant fire chief and having been a fire captain, it's really a pleasure to be able to have this opportunity to be here to speak to a group such as this of very like-minded individuals that have formed groups, become organized for one singular purpose, which is community safety. And this is really the grassroots and the intentions that we hear and see from the state level, and this is where it really does get actualized, I'd like to say. So I'll just go and kind of move through the slideshow. We are both rather long-winded at times, and we do have a lot to get across. So hopefully this doesn't run too long. But there's a lot up in our heads from doing this work for years and years and years, and really it is a passion of ours. From our previous work history all the way through the Park District, we really do bring everything we possibly can to this work, and the folks that are alongside us carrying out the work do as well too. So I'll go along with the presentation. So as we're here to speak towards the mitigation efforts, primarily in Tilden and the East Bay Hill Parks. So we have had in place a wildfire hazard reduction resource management plan since 2010. That came as a result of the 91 Oakland Hills fire. The Park District put into effect, enacted a fuels plan based on the results from a Blue Ribbon report that came from the findings from the Oakland Hills fire, which also resulted in the Hills Emergency Forum, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, which is a consortium of sorts for partner agencies. So prior to us having a fuels management plan, the Wildfire Hazard Reduction Resource Management Plan, we call it the WRUMP for short, that we had been doing fuels management work as an agency through the years, all the way back to post the 64 frost kill, I believe 64, but the freeze, going in and removing eucalyptus, and then you get the resprouts. So the district has a very, very long history of doing fuels management. Maybe at one point it was with operations, and our operations folks do a great deal of fuels management, but the large heavy lift that does the grant-related work that really does have the high impact here in the Hills is the Park District's the fire department's work. So the Wildfire Hazard Reduction Resource Management Plan identified over a 19,000 acre study area in the East Bay Hills, identified 130 areas that are called recommended treatment areas. And the way our minds work and how we geographically look at the landscape is based on these recommended treatment areas. They were all created in part because of their location, based upon the priorities that were laid out from this fuels management plan. It's 15 parks, goes all the way from Lake Chabot down at Castro Valley, all the way up to the shoreline up at Point Pinole. Thank you, Justin. So, that's a large area. Overall, it's 3,000 acres of recommended treatment areas. Tilden, I can't speak to exactly how many acres it encompasses, but it really is the highest priority areas based on vegetation type, location, proximity, based on fire behavior. Part of the plan in order to come up with the recommended treatment areas is done with some consultancies, and they actually did fire behavioral mapping to see where and how the fire would move across the landscape in certain situations and scenarios, as well as wind conditions, environmental factors that cause the movement and spread of fire. So the objectives that were placed that were really encompassed, or that are encompassed within the plan, are really in line with the regional parks and how we manage our lands, because we're not like any agency or we're our own entity in a way, because we do have that environmental ethic that guides us. You see that in our mission. It is in throughout how we do and function our work. So really looking to reduce the wildfire hazards on district-owned lands, East Bay Hills, to an acceptable level. Maintain and enhance ecological values. That's a very large part of why we do our work. And wildlife habitat, as well as meet our reduction goals as laid out in the plan. And you'll hear, flame lengths less than 8 feet as one of the goals, or not get up into the crown or canopy, surface fires. Those are all based on the fire spread behavior, but we all know that you don't want to see a fire get up into a canopy near along a roadway or near homes or within close proximity to proximity to communities. Oh. Yeah. We're right about here, next to TI-00, next to the TI-006. And then when you come again? What are the different color points? So the color points, the green is the Park District land, that's the study area. The blue areas are more of a maintenance area as identified by the fuels plan, where previous fuels treatment had been done prior to the Park District creating the rump. And then the red are areas that we call initial treatment, where initial treatment has not previously occurred or had not at the time of the plan's development. And then one last objective is to provide vegetation management plan which is cost effective, both financially and environmentally sustainable. And sustainability is a large part of how and why we do our work. And we do need to be conscious and cost effective in our work to make sure that we're getting the best value out of the funds spent for our projects. Next slide, please. So the rump was one means of permitting, and then in 2022, we went through what we identified tree mortality and tree dieback through our parks due to a long-term drought, and the impacts were both on natives, non-natives, primarily eucalyptus, pine species not native or indigenous to the area, caused large-scale dieback as well as some mortality, and that brought us to realize that yes, that 3,000 acres originally identified as part of our wildfire hazard reduction resource management plan needed to be re-looked at and revisited. So we went and sought permitting through a new permitting tool. The CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry just had put out and available to streamline fuels reduction work in areas of the state. We utilized that tool, worked with some consultancies, and we're one of the early adapters of the Cal VTP permitting process, and we're able to gather an additional 2,446 acres within the East Bay Hills, a lot of Tilden areas you can see on the map there, that allows us the permitting to go in and deal with some of these areas of tree mortality and tree dieback, as well as we're able to scope in new areas where we can actually expand more, do more brush removal, brush reduction, areas where grasslands have been encroached upon by brush species due to different maintenance strategies, as well as the ability to expand on different fuel breaks in areas that the rump maybe had not quite lined out for us. So from this map here, I can just point where we're at now on this one. So that was 5 parks in general. Quite a bit of the areas were actually in Tilden, acreage-wise. The different methods of treatment were ecological restoration, allows for more prescribed fire, and also shaded fuel break. And then there's some areas that were identified as wildland urban interface treatment based upon that specific PSA. The actual PSA name for the project that we took on is the East Bay Hills project-specific analysis. Next slide. What is a shaded fuel break? Yeah, so should we do that now? Questions as we go? Yeah, so shaded fuel break, it's a method of fuel break where you actually thin from below for the most part. So that's kind of like a forestry term in a ways. But if you do have an existing overstory, you go down through the understory, you limb up the ladder fuels, you'll thin out some of the, smaller, more suppressed vegetation or trees and or brush to retain an overstory of shade. Predominantly in this area, it's bay, sometimes eucalyptus, oak trees. That way you're actually keeping the fire on the surface, you're providing shade of the fuel, as well as soil moisture. Up here, the soil moisture does play a large impact as far as the fog drip and the cold precipitation. Sometimes could actually be more than what you actually get from the clouds, whatnot. So it's a proven method where you do have a good overstory, and sometimes we'll actually try and seek a shaded fuel break longer term. But good example would be if you go down Canyon Boulevard, just off to the left on your way down to on the left-hand side there where we retain the overstory. Does that help to answer your question? Okay. So, okay. Yeah, and I'm long-winded. I'm so sorry. Okay, so funding sources. So the funding sources are quite complicated and complex. If you go back to 2020, just for example, we had $2.3 million that we spent on fuels management. The grants, we had just a few at that time. Really, we were working with a PG&E grant. We had a CAL FIRE grant, a Wildland Urban Interface grant, and then a FEMA grant that we're working on. And at that time as well, too, our staffing was far different. So you move along and get to 2024, we're able to actually spend $11.8 million, and we'll get further into the capacity building portion of our program. The funding sources that we've kind of developed to get to the point where we're at in 2025 have been through those long-term creation of relationships with the different grantors, the partnerships through Hills Emergency Forum, the partnerships with the different agencies near that we work along with. So we've now been able to get to 2025, where overall we have $13.54 million in funding for fuels management. Another key aspect of that funding, if you look down there, it's the district measure FF passed in 2018, really did, that initiative really did and does continue to help keep our fuels program going. And that funding really does keep our fuels crew going in times where different grants aren't available for our fuels crew to work off of, as well as for our maintenance activities. As you guys all know, the goat grazing is one of the primary flashy fuels maintenance tools that we use. That is primarily district funds. We're really looking towards trying to figure out how to get more grant funding for that, but really at this point it's the district funds. So that those are really those measures, the district funding through our annual allocation from the district that's outside of Measure FF also really helps to keep things going, especially in times between grants when they hit their, they end and we kind of are waiting on another one. So 2026 funding, we'll get farther into the details of that, but we have our FEMA HMGP Tilden Claremont grant. We'll have some good maps of the specific locations that we've identified in our work plan for those areas, as well as the Coastal Conservancy grant that is really working towards resiliency. They've been a wonderful partner, and it's often said that if you could pick an agency to work on with a grant, you would go towards the Coastal Conservancy, because, you know, we were one of the first actual agencies. I believe we were the first agency that they granted as part of their resiliency program, which is now where the DOC is really looking to get a lot of the funding out, and that program has really grown. And we had to work with them on what the reporting requirements would look like, and they really hadn't dove off into the fuels management into things. And now we have a really good working rapport for them, and we're on our third grant with them, and they don't really have much as far as limitations on what you can or cannot do, as long as it's going to have a long-lasting impact and build on what the states and the governor's real goals are, which is quite frankly resiliency. They want to see projects that are going to last with time, and agencies that have a proven track record, which we quite frankly are. And then there's a few other grants that we've put in for throughout the years, and the FEMA grants, and we just don't really know where those are going to come through or not at this point, given the current state of things. So a project that we've partnered up through Hills Emergency Forum with Berkeley, UC Berkeley, the city of Berkeley, as well as East Bay Mud, is the Grizzly Peak Strategic Ridgeline Fuel Break. So I kind of coined the name the SRF, but it has a few different names. But you've seen the work if you're coming up from Fish Ranch Road up to Four Corners at the Claremont there. That is all the way up and along Grizzly Peak Boulevard, spans all the way to pretty much right where we're at now, from work that Berkeley did along Wildcat Canyon Road. So this grant was awarded through a coordinated effort with the Hills Emergency Forum and the partners that decided to join and put in for this grant, having had so many previous conversations as partnerships and working together, getting together on a monthly basis, realizing that, the different fuels treatments that we've all been doing over the years really didn't help to develop what you need for a fuel break is continuity. If a fuel break doesn't have a continuity located in the right locations, it really will not, there's a chance it might not function, as well as access routes, evacuation routes, as well as evacuation routes and critical infrastructure and proximate to homes. So taking all those in, we identified the fuels treatment zone for the regional park district that tied in with what East Bay Mud was doing, tied in with what Berkeley was doing, and built off of previous fuels treatments that we had already done to really create a contiguous fuel break. And one of the things that really is very, very exciting about this grant is where the city of Berkeley went with this, was to actually move down and through and into the communities on the evacuation routes, work off of the roads. They figured out somehow how to go onto and work on private property, which I was completely amazed with. And it really spawned and turned into what is a far greater project than just doing work in the hills, but actually getting down in the community, as well as the information sharing that has been done through that collaboration between the agencies, and getting the information out of where the project areas are, what everybody's doing, and then moving on and over into the defensible space and home hardening education. It has been, I think, one of the most impactful projects I've been a part of in my career here with the Park District and in fire. So we were awarded that grant, $2.8 million. The Park District share actually went a little bit long, so we actually went over and helped out on a piece of East Bay Mud land when they ran out of funding. So this is actually, the video is actually working. So this is, that's our fuels crew at work up on Nimitz Way Trail doing a pile burn project. As you can see that is a adequately thinned understory eucalyptus forest. And just kind of thought it'd be nice to have a picture in there. So the California State Coastal Conservancy, as I mentioned, wonderful project. We've had over $2 million that we've been able to allocate towards treatment in Tilden, Anthony Chabot, Carquinez, as well as Tin Hill Trails, which is down along the interface along Lake Chabot. So this project, we were able to secure 1.2 million directly for fuels treatment in Tilden Park in a eucalyptus stand that has previously been untreated in the area of the Tilden Nature Area. The other part of it is we're looking at using different fuels treatment methods on that project. So in the future, we're going to have a large-scale pile burning project in there as part of trying to explore different methods, as well as to minimize the amount of ground disturbance from our fuels treatment. As part of our partnership and working with the California Native Plant Society on coming up with different treatment methods and working on getting our fuels program really as what firefighters can do is actually get rid of the material by burning it in place rather than just leaving it in there as a surface fuel and adding to any additional fuels accumulation. Another long-term end of this is the $500,000 for fuels management equipment that's going to be given to, or we're actively purchasing for our fuels crew. A track chipper, which is a piece of equipment you normally see in the contractor's hands, as well as a grapple truck to be able to move the equipment around, and a mini skid steer, as well as a green climber remote masticator. So it's really the ability with these tools, our fuels crew is going to be able to do a lot more of the work that's similar to what our contractors are able to do. So move on to the next. And this is you.
That's me.
All right.
All right, so kind of continuing on with our funding portion. The next grant that we are talking about is the FEMA HMGP 2019. We applied for this grant in 2019. We were awarded it this year in January, and our original performance period was January of 26. So we were given $4.2 million for work in both Tilden and Claremont. When we originally applied for the grant, we said it would take 3 years, and they gave us 355 days to pull that off. So luckily, we were able to get an extension of that grant a few months ago, so we have till January 3rd of 2027. So this grant's going to be doing a lot of work in the Tilden and Claremont area. So we've already completed one project under this grant in Gwynn Canyon, which is right over the hill from where the Oakland Hills fire started, and that canyon was burned in the fire. Where we have one project currently ongoing just up the ridge by Ajax in that area, right by Native Hair Nursery. If you've been down there, you can see some work happening. And we have another larger project plan, hopefully starting in the next week or two, right below the Brazil Room in the eucalyptus stand, kind of below that between Brazil Room and Lake Anza. And so, and then for 2026, we have multiple larger projects and smaller projects all spread out through the mapped area. The areas in pink are the areas that we are approved for funding work in both those parks. So some of the bigger projects of note will be around the merry-go-round, the eucalyptus stand around the merry-go-round. We're going to be thinning that pretty extensively, and then also doing a little bit more work over by Ajax next summer after we can get in and around the Powell Manzanitas after the wet seasons occurred, and also at the top of Golf Course Road, kind of between the golf course and Grizzly Peak, kind of along the Golf Course Road section, that big section in there. And we're going to be doing some additional work in Claremont Canyon as well. A lot of this work will be done by contract, but some of the work will be done by our in-house crew as well, which is pretty exciting. I am running the hand crew, so we'll be able to get in and use some of that equipment that Chief McIntyre mentioned and do some work on the ground with it. So Excited to have this grant because, and the FRCs, who I'm also helping to manage right now, are planning actively right now towards the 2026 season and also implementing the work currently right now. So this was a exciting opportunity that showed up 6 years after we applied for it, kind of out of nowhere. So Chief McIntyre and the FRCs did a really good job of shifting gears quite quickly to get this money on the ground with our grants department and all the other departments to start getting work done relatively quickly from award time. So it's been, and I got to help with that too. So it's been a pretty exciting time, lots of planning and replanning once that money arrived. So we can go to the next slide. Some larger, kind of going back again as far as for staffing and capacity, going back to 2010 with the adoption of the WRUMP. If we go back during that time, there really wasn't an assistant chief of fuels management and one or two captains just for in the fire department that were working with fuels management, along with a kind of a contract management position. And over the years, if you kind of track through here, you can see we've gotten additional grants and we've added staffing to kind of where we are today. We have an assistant chief of fuels management with an admin analyst. We have 2 dedicated fuels captains, 1 fuels lieutenant, 5 fuels reduction coordinators who are project managers and project planners, and we have a fuels crew of 14 people out in the field doing that, managed by one of those captains and that lieutenant. So we've gone from a plan and a couple staff to quite a large staff where we can plan and implement projects of various sizes, from our annual maintenance all the way up to multi-million-dollar large tree remover contracts across our work area. And a lot of that has been part and parcel to our ability to get grant funding from multiple different funding sources and grantors, whether it be from like PG&E, Fire Safe Councils, FEMA, State Coastal Conservancy, CAL FIRE. There's been multiple grants that have helped move us along our journey, and then also quite a bit of funding that's been from Measure FF and also District General Fund as well. So it helps us keep moving with what we're going. The picture in the bottom is a picture of the carbonizer, which a lot of people has probably heard about. So that was implemented as part of a CalRecycle direct pass-through grant that was used to process biomass created at the Anthony Chabot projects, and associated a picture of the hand crew and some of our firefighters just about to implement a pile burn also in Anthony Chabot earlier this year as well. We can go to the next slide. So that kind of brings us to how we're doing some work. We've covered some funding and where we're doing the work. So our Diablo Fuels crew, our hand crew, it's a 16-person crew with again, a captain, a lieutenant, and 14 people on the crew. We are full-time, year-round, union benefited positions, and we work all over the Park District, generally focusing in the areas that we have permitted in the WRUMP and the BTP areas. This is a picture of the crew hiking in earlier this year to Leona Canyon in an area to do some defensible space. The picture on the top right you can see is Claremont Canyon, very steep ground, doing some work behind some homes, just kind of below Panoramic and above Claremont Canyon. And this is another picture of that pile burning operation that we kind of saw the video of out in the Nimitz. And so this crew's highly adaptable and maneuverable because they're staff. We can be doing a project in Lake Chabot one day, and we can come up here tomorrow in Tilden because we can move around. The contractors are not as nimble as that generally. And one thing with the hand crew is they also fight fire as well. So we're out doing the work prior to doing fuels management, and we can also respond to fires and assist with fire suppression, along with our other firefighting resources that we have. We have 8 firefighter 2s and 2 lieutenants that staff 1 fire engine out of Station 1 7 days a week. In addition to, we have 2 helicopters that have water dropping capabilities that's staffed on as needed and on red flag days. We can keep going. The other main way that we do work is through contractors. So If we have an on-call fuels contract that we have multiple contractors on file that we can call up on short notice to perform work rather quickly. The two pictures on top are actually from a CAL FIRE funded project that just finished over on Ajax around the Powell Manzanita. So it's a picture of a crane, and then you have a excavator with a track chipper, equipment that the Park District doesn't own, can't do, and we contract out with experts and specialty tree contractors to get that work done at scale and volume. We also have contracts with other local conservation corps, both the CCC and mainly Civicor. So you'll see them out running line trimmers, doing annual maintenance a lot of times in Wildcat Canyon, also up here in the Tilden area. And one of our really big contracts is our goat and sheep grazing services that we have approximately 1,000 acres across the East Bay, all the way down in Fremont, all the way up to kind of Port Costa up on the north. So we have, we're actually going out for RFP for that this year. So we currently have 3 grazers. We'll see how many we get out of this next round. And that's one of our main ways of doing maintenance work. And on the 2 bottom pictures, you can see one is an untreated area on the left, and on the right is what we treated afterwards. So the Civicor and the goat grazing help us keep the picture on the right looking like it does on the right, so that the vegetation doesn't grow back in. We use the tree contractors up top to get it to the picture, from the picture on the left to the picture on the right. And so that's done with staff and also contractors. And and we're working multiple contracts. Like right now, we have 4 contracts going, and we're planning 2 additional contracts as it sits right now. And those contracts are getting managed by, we now have 5 FRCs. We just added our 5th FRC this year with additional funding from the Park District, and we're very happy to have them on board, and they started a few weeks ago. So we can go to the next slide. So the Ajax fire. So this fire occurred October 12th of 2017. As Director Echols noted, same night as the nuns and the tubs. And it was during a north wind event. I'll try to speed it up. You can see in the middle of that map the burn area. It's pink. Everything else, all those boxes and colors, those are fuels treatment projects that we've done over the years, specifically in that area. And it tells a good story of work that we've done pre-fire and also post-fire. And so it is indicative of how and where we do work. Some of those are initial treatment projects where we hadn't cleared areas before, and a lot of those are maintenance projects. And currently right now, we have a project going on right here, which isn't currently on this map. And we just finished a project up here that's not on this map. And we have more coming as well. Yeah, Patrick and I were both on this fire that night. We were, part of our response is we're on-call firefighters. We were on-call firefighters at the time. We responded from home in the middle of the night to a fire engine, to that fire. Impactful. I grew up in the Bay Area, East Bay, so Hills fire. I was 7 years old for the Hills fire, so it kind of brought back some memories of that as a child, responding to that fire, and was pretty proud of everyone there that day who had a quick initial attack, and also very proud of the work we did prior to that fire as well. And the picture is post-fire, that winter post-fire. It does not look like that today. If you drive down Golf Course Road, you will not see that in the fire area. It has been treated and thinned and looks much better than that. But that's what it looks like post-fire. All right. I think this is back to you.
And yeah, and the reason for that picture is we encourage you to get over to that area and take a look. It's over by the second hole on the golf course where that bend is just this side of the entrance to the golf course. So this is kind of an interesting part of our overall kind of journey through fuels management. And as I mentioned earlier, we had the tree dieback and the tree mortality take place. So as we're doing everything that we're doing as far as safeguarding our communities by doing the fuels management work in our prioritized areas, have a work plan in place, then came, as a result of the droughts, the tree decline, tree dieback mortality. this isn't quite, this could have been a video, but it's just not pulling up and working. But that's from a picture image from some of the aerial reconnaissance that we were doing as part of the identified tree mortality back in 2020. And that's actually in Anthony Chabot, where it was particularly hit hard. The eucalyptus really were, after a lot of analysis and work, as it says there, looking at the areas, reaching out to our partners and neighbors, UC Garboletto Labs, doing studies, actually taking samples from the trees. They go back to the laboratory, do a culture, see what it was, because at that same time there was a pathogen that was getting after the acacia trees as well too, and we didn't know exactly what it was or what the overall impact was going to be. But we did know that there was no true option of just sitting back and not doing anything. We knew, as experts in our field, that there definitely was the need to take action. So we did the analysis, figured out what the potential long-term impacts could be in these areas, and came up with an overall inventory and plan, worked with our legislative affairs, were able to secure funding through that direct allocation that Captain Neville mentioned, and were able to accomplish 667 acres, it keeps growing, of eucalyptus thinning in forest management in Anthony Chabot. But also a portion of that funding went directly to work in Tilden along golf course, or along South Park Drive, where both eucalyptus and Monterey pine species were really hit very hard. So, another kind of tour along through the hills, just South Park Drive, that fuels management project. If you haven't been through there, really did have a lasting long impact. And by all means, the mortality and dieback and the impacts of future potential climate change impacts, as well as, long-term droughts. Through our fuels treatment, we really are confident that will help to minimize those impacts on the residual stand, because the impacts of drought and or resource scarcity are quite worse when you have overly stocked, over dense stands that are at levels that the resources get scarce. That's when the latent pathogens can come in and actually cause dieback and mortality. And we were assured by Garboletto Labs that latent pathogen in the eucalyptus is known and is an actual pathogen that can cause wide-scale vast mortality in eucalyptus. So we went and thinned out those eucalyptus stands and ultimately have a much lower fire hazard and fire risk. Next slide, please. So this here is where the Tilden South Park dieback project is, along South Park Drive, all the way from, it's the red identified area on the map. So from the Botanic Garden all the way up to Grizzly Peak Boulevard. And we were able to, numbers wise, I can't count the numbers, or I can't think offhand how many trees were actually taken, but it was in the thousands of trees removed. And we're able to actually do that fuels treatment in a way that enhanced the residual existing vegetation. As Captain Neville mentioned, we have our on-call contractors and our contractors that we commonly work with. We've really worked with them over years and years to really build up their understanding and knowledge and equipment and their base to be able to perform fuels management projects to, a standard that we hold them to, with, if we say retain this tree, they have to figure out how to remove these big, huge eucalyptus trees and retain those trees that we say we want to retain, because we do not want to remove everything. We really do want to keep that stand viably and ecologically healthy over time. So primarily pine mortality through that area. That was the portion of that direct allocation that we received through CAL FIRE that was dedicated towards Tilden Park. The primary, of that $10 million, I believe it was about 1.3 that went into into Tilden Park. I would say that as far as an evacuation route goes, in the event, that is far more of a viable evacuation route, as well as it kind of gives us a stronghold to do more fuels treatment up in along that area, because we have been very diligent adjacent to right along the homes and structures, but we know that in the event of a fire resources may need to do defensive action, which would be to say fire off of that road if a fire's coming up and over from the Orinda side. So it really does tactically kind of help our fire resources to be able to catch and hold a fire rather than let it get all the way up and over towards the communities or closer. So here's another example, as Director Echols mentioned, of a that really showed us the effectiveness of our fuels treatment and where and how we strategize and do what we do, where we do it, and how we thin and or remove the vegetation, as well as how we maintain it. So this fire took place October 6, 2024. I actually made it to that fire. It was about 1:30, 1 in the morning. It was on a night that we were in fire weather watch. We were just about to pivot and get over and into red flag. I was actually out observing the Ohlone tribe burning a ceremonial burn out at Coyote Hills when that fire broke off, kind of oddly enough. It was held up solely because of our fuels treatment work. So this was a vehicle that was stolen, likely ditched, burned in place. And this fire actually, some of the images that were captured actually show the fire actually getting up and into the trees. And ember cast was, fairly significant, directly going straight up. The local resources, Oakland, as well as the Park District in Alameda County, were able to contain that fire at far less than an acre. The stables are just right up above from that, Skyline Stables. They were able to, not have to evacuate the stables, as well as just above and beyond that, there was an area that we had yet not treated due to, part of our prioritization and work planning. We did not get any ember cast over and into that area. The fire was contained right to what you see here. Since then, we've actually put our fuels crew back in there using some grant funding that we were able to secure from a FEMA 2024 grant that we've actually worked all the way up above where you see the fellow up on the top with the headlamp and the flashlight, all the way up and over and along back behind all those homes. But had this not been treated, had those eucalyptus not already been ladder fueled, limbed up, thinned, and surface fuels, continuity all the way up from the surface all the way up, there would have probably been spot fires that had gone up and over and, possibly threatened the homes up above. One other thing about that night, it was very, very, very dry and very hot. Winds weren't a factor, but it was in a thermal belt, 0 winds, but the relative humidities were so low. It was in October, as we're saying, that's when the fuel bed's most receptive as well too. So a wonderful example of how our strategy and where we do our fuels work is functioning. So, and fire was just right down there. Don't really make it onto the map, but you can see the proximity to community. So Tilden Fuels Treatment, I believe this goes to you.
So what we're looking at on the screen is an image of our mapped work areas that we've done over the past 10 years. Each color is representative of a different treatment type and a different year, and kind of shown so everyone can see where we've have historically been doing work over at least the past 10 years. A lot of this is grant-funded work, a lot of this is maintenance, and a lot of this is goat grazing. But if we kind of saw on the Ajax map, when we zoomed in on a specific area, there was lots of overlapping. It looks like that pretty much all along a lot of these work areas. So we can go to the next slide. So recently completed projects, kind of bringing it back a little bit more to what we've been doing the last couple of years. The South Park VTP projects, the tree die-off projects were completed in 2024 with a Cal Recycle grant. We had a round of Cal Fire grant funding that we were able to complete additional work along Golf Course Road in that Ajax area, as well as I think also on South Park as well in that area, and also some Shasta Road projects to kind of tie into some of these other areas. In 2025, additional Cal Fire grant project along Grizzly Peak around the area of Grizzly Flats, so kind of north of here along Grizzly Peak. Some good thinning, and then also some work along Golf Course Road that we saw some pictures of earlier. And then an area that we touched on is the Tilden Nature Area Phase 1 with the Coastal Conservancy grant. We treated about 10 to 15 acres just north of the EEC down in Tilden. We're using one of our contractors, and we have 300 hand piles that we have to burn this winter. So you'll be seeing some smoke in the area later. That's one of the areas that we have burn piles. And then another project that was a cooperative project with, I think, 2 or 3 different agencies, including us, that I think Chief McIntyre did a really good job organizing with the local Civic Corps, a training opportunity for chainsaw training with our local youth corps, as well as some fuels management work that got done in association with that out along Nimitz to continue to tie in some of the areas that we hadn't yet worked, but was adjacent to areas that we had worked previously. And kind of the image on the left is a picture from one of our fuels prescriptions, which is kind of what we're working off of when we're going out planning our fuels projects. We have a written prescription that tells us what our vegetation management goal is, our fuels management objectives, and then how we're going to get to those, and any resource considerations that we need to be aware of when we're doing that work. And you can kind of, we have some pictures in there, an untreated eucalyptus stand along South Park, same area that was cut. Picture's a little blurry, so I apologize. But that's sort of the work that we've done, and that's just the initial treatment projects that we've done in 24 and 25. We've also done, we've goat grazed both of those years. We have ran our fuels crew to do maintenance projects. We've used contractors for maintenance projects throughout the area, and we'll be continuing to do, we burn piles both of those years in Tilden. Some of you may have noticed. And we have more coming up. We can go to the next slide. So that's just what we did in 25. That map is just 2025 with the areas that we worked. So before, there was a lot more layers turned on, and it was a lot more cluttered, but still, even with just the work we did in 2025, it can show where we're doing work. And again, each one of those colors is a different type of treatment, but that was work done in 2025. Purple is the big group. That's goat grazing, if anyone. That's where we're grazing goats. And that brings us to planned projects that we have moving in. Is that you? Is that me? I think that's me. Yeah, it's you. Yeah, it's you.
All right. Thank you all. So planned projects, as you can see, this is the repeat of that map earlier with all the areas that have been identified as part of the FEMA 2019 area that Captain Neville mentioned. So really, the hand crew, they're going to be doing a lot of pile burning in Tilden. We're going to be doing that in working with Moraga Rinda Fire. Hopefully we can get Berkeley Fire involved in that when the opportunity comes to do those pile burns. There's a few other burn pile projects as well too, one underneath, just kind of in the bowl below the Kensington Hilltop Elementary School that will be taking place as well too, so just adds up for that. And we're actually working to partner as well with Moraga Rinda Fire on a long planned broadcast understory burn in Tilden in the Nimitz Way eucalyptus stand. Initially, that eucalyptus stand was treated, thinned out in 2018, I believe, 2018 or 2019. And we did the initial treatment, really thinned it out, thinned it heavy, and have continued to maintain that to a, acceptable level is what we, strive for within our fuels plan, and a long-term management and maintenance goal in that area. And we've been, during our maintenance, moving towards that is to do a very low intensity understory broadcast burn to keep the maintenance up in there and not have to go back in to, line trim it annually and really bring forward and become, come in line with the goals of the governor and the state to actually bring more good fire back onto the land. So we're working with Moraga Rinda on planning that fire. We're hoping for that broadcast burn to take place in later November, early December when conditions are right. But as anybody knows, prescribed burns, you can plan and plan and plan, and if the conditions aren't correct and you're not within prescription, you're not going to do that burn. So we're optimistic, and when that takes place, we'll definitely make sure that we're getting the word out, because it will be visible from over on this side of the hill, looking off over towards Nimitz Way Trail, kind of more towards San Pablo Peak kind of ish. And reentry maintenance, that has been a very large part of how we're going about our work planning, is to really focus not only on initial treatment, because if you're doing nothing but initial treatment and then not following that prescription that we work on and write, we put those prescriptions together ourselves as professionals. If you're not following that prescription, you're going to let the area go back to a state that it was prior to doing the fuels treatment. It's just really not a cost-effective or efficient method to have to go back every, say, 10 years, 20 years and do a initial treatment all over again. And as anybody knows, eucalyptus is it's very vigorous resprouting species. And so are a lot of the other species, as well as the non-natives that can sometimes come in and take over an area. So we're working in our work, we're making sure that part of our work plan is to go back in on those intervals as necessary, depending on what the fuel type is, to ensure that we're maintaining those areas at an acceptable level. Sometimes it's just ghosts, sometimes it's actually going back through with a crew or a masticator, heavy equipment, or just a new thinnings in store every 3 or 4 or 5 years. And eventually we would like to, where it is most appropriate, see to the use of prescribed fire in some of these areas. Yeah.
Because eucalyptus is a big problem around here.
Yeah.
So much drops, and then if it isn't cleared for years and years, it's
Yeah.
and then, so when you talk about a burn, what are you talking about, burning 100 eucalyptus?
Yeah, so in order to prepare for an understory burn, you have to do a very large amount of prep work. As you know, you can't just go in there without previous treatment and think that you're going to do a nice understory burn in a eucalyptus stand. You have to come in with crews, gather, collect all the material, and then do hand piles, burn those hand piles in advance. A lot of the projects that we've done, we've actually done a very large scale, initial treatment project, thinning from below, removing all of the understory vegetation, retaining the natives, with the hopes that, over time, one of the ideas is that it's kind of, that thinning from below idea, that you'll have that overstory, and eventually that eucalyptus overstory will not be there. We'll come back in, we'll slowly remove more and more of those trees, as well as just through attrition. Trees die, trees fall, and we'll come back in and we'll clean that up. But really, we're reducing the fuel loading to a level that's acceptable, so that at the opportune time you can come through and do a very low intensity understory burn. And that way you're actually getting rid of all of that litter, that duff, that fuel on the surface fuel, and giving it an opportunity to really, get to where you're moving a lot more towards those long-term goals in that area. So it's a lot of work to get to. We've been planning towards that for probably about 4 years in that area, and working towards it through crews, contractors, all the above. Tilden Eucalyptus Grove Mitigation. So this is the area where we're discussing the understory burn. In in Tilden. So this is actually up along Nimitz Way. As you can see, there's some surface fuels in that area, but this is part of that process. So we actually sent crews through, removed picked up all of the litter, all of the, litter, duff, accumulated bark, all of that, and did the hand piles and understory. So this is what's going to be taking place in the eucalyptus grove down in the area of the Tilden Nature area. And one of the wonderful things of that eucalyptus stand is that when I first went in there to look at that with an old captain, you could not walk from Nimitz Way Trail 10 feet in without really just, you had to have like your slash legs on, so to speak, or should have had like cork boots to get around through that, because it was so dense and overstocked, and the trees per acre were, out much further outside of what we'd like to have. And if a fire had gotten into there at the wrong time, it definitely would have been a crown fire that would have, under a north wind event, ember cast over towards the area of Tilden Nature area down below. So it's out there in an area that you wouldn't think that fuels treatment would be completely necessary, but strategically in the bigger picture, fuels treatment and eucalyptus stand out on a ridge like that is very important, because, between there and San Pablo Ridge Road, there's San Pablo Dam Road, there really isn't much of anything. So funding sources, so State Coastal Conservancy is one of our primary funding sources for Anthony. It's still me, right? Sorry. We're going a little bit long, I'm sorry too. So this kind of brings in the Anthony Chabot project, talking about the 667 acres that we treated in Anthony Chabot of eucalyptus. I know that's not immediately here near you guys, but we're all in the Bay Area. Any impact from a fire in that area is going to impact us as well too. I think we could specifically say, even if it does not move over and into Berkeley, is able to go anywhere. So Anthony Chabot, very large scale work project that we've been doing. And as you can see, we had State Coastal Conservancy funding to do a pilot project to see if a carbonizer would work. Test that out. Had never been operated in the Bay Area. A carbonizer had never been used. And then the other thing is you get biochar from that. What are we going to do with all that biochar from processing all the biomass that was created as part of the eucalyptus thinning? The FEMA, we've had a FEMA PDM grant that's aided in, and that was a direct allocation that we were able to get through Senator Padilla's office, through working with our legislative affairs, to do additional fuels treatment that was outside of the larger state funding that the grant or the funding that we received through Cal Recycle. As well, the fire department general fund was able to keep us moving along through that project during a lean period between grants, in timing wise, was able to keep us moving through and along through that project. So that district funding that we're able to keep us moving, it really does help us get through those tight periods. So overall, that really did prove that we have the ability and the capacity to do very large scale fuels management. We know what we're doing when it comes to eucalyptus fuels treatment. There is the capacity that was built locally and regionally in the understanding of fuels treatment, eucalyptus. Longer term, we're studying all kinds of things with that project, working with the UC cooperative, as well as we're going to maintain all of that. It's not easy or cheap, but we have a plan in place to be able to maintain all of that. So here's a little bit of a, biochar into things. So this is, to give you an idea of that project, that eucalyptus thinning, and how that was done with very cutting edge technology. Right there, you have a forwarder, or you have a hot saw, but it's basically a boom mounted saw, so like a feller buncher of sorts, that is moving through thinning, and then that material would then be taken on a piece of equipment kind of similar to that would take it over to the processing area out in Anthony Chabot. So this here is the processing area logs from that thinning were taken to and then loaded up and into the carbonizer that was then turned into biochar, which is a commodity, in all honesty, that was then utilized in the park district as part of our greater plan. And we actually sequestered all that carbon as far as that fuels treatment and put it back into the earth for different purposes such as agriculture, erosion control, restoration projects, and also water management and stormwater management. So there you see it out in Guerin underneath the apple orchards to help to keep that historic orchard healthy. And I could go on for hours about the benefits of biochar. But I think that closes it up.
Thank you, Captain McIntyre, and thank you, Chief McIntyre, Captain Neville. Thank you so much for all the information. I have two quick ones for you. Can we get a copy of the slides to share? Is that possible? Do you know?
I believe so.
If we could, because I know some of the writing was probably small from in the back, so that'd be great. And two, we will take some question and answer now, but if we send you some written questions also, would you mind? Like, because there might be some things that we'll get in the days to follow, and then we can kind of send those over and distribute those answers too. So just process-wise, then we can. I know we'll have some time for questions, but I know folks will have places to go, and we will have a way of getting answers to the questions. So let's start Q&A. I'll start here, and then we'll go back. Yeah, I'll pass around the mic.
Thank you for the energetic presentation and all the thinking and work that it represents. This jumps ahead to fire suppression without disregarding everything you've said. One of the things we all know is that a lot of the very bad California fires were the result of fires that were not entirely extinguished. So I want to emphasize the importance of that as part of the protocol for our neighborhood, because we are in the path of any fire in Tilden Park, and we're all working terribly hard. We gave up vacation time, vacation budget to harden the house and do Ember. So we want fires put out completely. So that's my urgent message, but if you could say something about what you do to make sure that fires are put out completely.
Can you?
We both, I'll start, and if Captain Neville has something else to add. We talk about this all the time. So I think the added benefit of having the East Bay Regional Park District Fire Department is that when there is a fire on Park District land, we will show up, we will assist other resources in the suppression, as well as we make sure that a fire is 100% mopped up. So mopped up in line. So you have controlled and contained. We make sure that the fire is both controlled and contained prior to leaving, and then we'll come back and check on it. It's very much common practice to even have an engine stay on the fire, especially if it's during, elevated fire weather conditions. If there's an incoming, wind event or anything like that, that by all means, but it's very much part of our practice. When we send folks to fire, we'll send a duty officer, so a captain, somewhat like a battalion chief, as well as what resources we have or ask for by that incident or by that partnering agency, and we'll make sure that we stay on that fire and mop up. It's very much been a long part of, I would say, instilled within our culture. So
I guess the only thing I'll add is one of the benefits of the Park District having its own hand crew is wildland firefighting is a very laborious task that takes a large number of people. So having that additional resource at our disposal to use in those events of fires that happen in the middle of the night, we will routinely come in the next day to assist with mop up and get line around the fire, and we'll do so for days afterwards. So we take it pretty seriously. There is, it's not just the Palisades, there's other fires, so mop up is one of the most important things we do.
Were you going to ask one?
Hi, my name is Michel Touali. I'm with Creston Firewise. Over the past year and a half, we've all found out many different things that you guys have known for a long time. It was great to see in that presentation the passion and the professionalism and also the progress that you've introduced. I've been a resident for more than 35 years, and I know I've seen a lot of the things that you've talked about. I've walked the eucalyptus groves. I've also walked Wildcat Canyon many times and walked all the way from Richmond down to Oakland, etc. One of the things that we found is that what we do alone doesn't make much of a difference, but what we do in collaboration with other entities and groups makes a huge difference. So starting from our own, for instance, Firewise groups, we started collaborating across Berkeley, then with Oakland, FireSafe and Firewise, then with Kensington and El Cerrito. Now we're talking to Richmond. So progressively, we're creating a group of wildfire entities that are on the boundary of the East Bay Park District. And of course, the fire that will hit us will start in the East Bay Park District. We all know that. And it's going to move towards us. So last year, we actually tried to start collaborating with the East Bay Park District. Kensington has an ongoing collaboration with you already. But when we talked to EBRPD, we were told that only Kensington can work with you and none of us can work with you. Now, as we all know, money is the nerve of war in all of this. Grants are only going to get us so far. We will never get enough money to do everything we need to do, but we have a lot of residents and a lot of volunteers, hundreds of volunteers participate in some of these activities that we've been doing. We would like to be able to work with you and improve the interface. We all know when we walk, for instance, Wildcat Canyon, that there are tons of areas where there is enormous potential for canopy fires going over Wildcat Canyon. The land right around Wildcat Canyon is distributed between the East Bay Park, the city of Berkeley, private land, East Bay Mud, and all of these other municipalities. Unless we're able to work with you somehow or another in collaboration, we'll never be able to deal with that interface. So how can we start working with you beyond just Kensington and EBRPD, but including Berkeley, Oakland, Richmond, and El Cerrito?
So, you very, very well said, sir. I appreciate the compliments of our fields program, as well as the understanding of the condition, the situation. One thing that we really do always like to highlight is that we're all in this together, working on the issue, the problem, in unity, I would say. So we're handling and doing all that we can with the resources that we have at our availability in the permitting to do the fuels management activities to help to safeguard the adjacent communities. And we ask that you as neighbors do the same on your side, on your properties, and work on the defensible space, the home hardening. I know you guys are all working very hard and advocating for that. As far as a pathway towards a collaborative effort, and or minus the funding, and or with the funding, on how we can do a volunteer program, or if there's, you know, a right of entry kind of agreement for certain areas. I think there's the possibility to discuss that. That is the one existing in place is the Kensington right of entry area, as you're very well aware of, and that has a history to it that I'm not going to go completely into the detail on, but I believe that there could possibly be an avenue. The thing we run up against is the permitting and the actual, you know, the permitting. You can't just allow anybody to go into the park district and do fuels management activities. We need to follow and adhere to very strict guidelines as part of our permitting, because we can't compromise that. If there are, you know, sensitive or endangered species, which we do have within our fuels treatment areas, the Alameda whipsnake, the pallid manzanita, wood rats are protected. That could be problematic as far as our permitting. So we can't just allow anybody to go in and do fuels treatment work, but there has been some discussions about potentials for future collaboration and right of entry agreements. I can't speak to that particularly right now and where those are at, but there very well could be avenues ahead. One thing I can definitely let you know is that we are within that 100 feet, 200 feet of homes where folks can't get their defensible space that live directly adjacent to our parklands. We're doing everything we can to keep those maintained at a low fire hazard, low risk. And we shoot to have that done in a timely manner, as well as aim to take on that responsibility, because we, at this point, don't have an avenue for everybody to come into the park property and do work on their side. Yeah.
Right of entry into the park, or right of entry into the city?
It's into the park.
I'll just say, like, I'm happy to take that, and Elizabeth and I can, if there's some policy things, Liz and I can also work on that and see if there's something else we can do between the city and the park district. Again, if there are policy limitations, I'd love to understand them and see what we could do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd like to follow up on an earlier comment about the difference between Kensington and Berkeley. Because I took a walk at the end of Lake Street, and I'd like to show people what that looks like. It's so nice. It's like walking through a park. Can you distribute those, please? Yeah. It's like walking through a park. All the trees were pruned up. The grass was cut. The shrubs were cut. The poison oak was cut to the ground. It was just beautiful. Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. It's lovely. The second group of pictures, please have a look at them. On the way back, I walked back along Wildcat Canyon, starting at this church to Sunset Lane to enter our neighborhood, the neighborhood that's been fighting very hard to implement the Ember project. And these are all pictures taken from the road along Wildcat Canyon. And the difference was just astounding and very, very disturbing. So I would like to know, why can't Berkeley do this? That's what we want to know, because we're working really hard on it. But if we have these kinds of conditions immediately east of us, it doesn't matter what we do. It's very, very worrisome.
Thank you. I don't know if you can speak to that. I mean, I'll say, look, every bit helps, right? Every bit that they're doing helps. We are making progress. There are areas we're going to miss, and let's highlight those areas and work on them. So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, but that's not the point. What is, how does Berkeley in our neighborhood get the same kind of treatment that
Okay.
Kensington's getting? That's the basic question.
Okay.
And it wasn't answered really frankly.
Okay.
I can.
Sure, go
so,
ahead. Chris.
That specific area as well too, we've done, we did a FEMA grant initial treatment in that specific area along Kensington, as well as last year came in for a reentry treatment. So that reentry cycle that we have as part of our fuels program, we can't reentry every single area right on time. So that work that you saw along Geel School Trail, that's part of the maintenance work that just happened as part of our fuels crew. They went through, they did the mastication of the brush, as well as followed up right after that, the goats had come through. So those areas, I believe those pictures were along the recommended treatment area TI-009 along Wildcat Canyon Road. Those are the areas where we will go back in and do reentry type treatment.
I got there, frankly, and please, there were piles of dead brush. There were piles of branches that had been cut and left in place. That seems inexcusable. If you're going to go through and do a stay, there are parts that were taken care of properly, but there were long stretches where the vegetation was incredibly dense. There were eucalyptus trees where the vegetation came right down to the ground, along with a lot of leaf litter. But the branches and dead trees just left in place.
I actually have a question too, because I know that some of the new work that we're doing is along Wildcat Canyon, and so does that go for all the way to Grizzly Peak, so through the park to Grizzly Peak?
Yes.
Because if so, then some of these areas that he's referring to should be addressed.
I took the pictures August 4th. I took the same walk last week.
Right, but that's, we're still working through that area, is that correct, or is that, let you talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So the FEMA grant funding does touch some of those areas along Wildcat Canyon Road, which is the recommended treatment area, TI-009. So what we've done to this point is we've gone through and done some treatment, some of the areas, but haven't been able to go through and do a very large scale treatment. And really, the initial treatment for that area, that used to be eucalyptus all throughout. That was eucalyptus primarily throughout, and the stumps don't lie type of a thing. So fuels treatment was done years and years ago, and we've been working on keeping that in a maintenance regime of sorts. But the FEMA grant will allow us to go in and do more. And what you pictured is what we call jackpot fuel loading, and that takes place and happens over time. You have trees fail, you have trees succumb to wind damage, and when we have folks like you that see those within the parks and bring forward your concerns, that really helps us to know maybe there's something there's an area or something that we haven't noticed or seen, or a fuels issue, and we'll send a fuels reduction coordinator out, come take an assessment, get eyes on it. And that's the beauty of having both the fuels crew as well as our on-call contracting, is that certain times of the year, moving into fire season, we'll send around a contractor to just deal with problem areas where we've had trees that have failed wind throw over the season. So please do reach out to us and let us know exactly where those issues are, and we'll do everything in our, as possible to handle those. A fair amount of it might be touched or treated as part of that FEMA grant.
I sure hope so. Because a lot of those grants were just cut.
Yeah, if you can, you did say it was the Wildcat Canyon, but if you can show us or indicate exactly or follow up exactly where those spots are, and then, yes, I'm sure.
Anybody
Yeah.
individually or
Yeah.
collectively.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
So let's do Chris and two more questions.
Okay, that was a lot to take in, and my brain is full. But I want to focus back on Kensington for just a moment. There's an elementary school in Kensington which is next to a very steep slope coming down into park-maintained land. I understand that the park could not completely clear that slope because you were concerned about slope slippage, basically. Which is reasonable. But of course, the residents are concerned about fire, coming up there because it isn't as completely cleared as other places are. What else could they do, or perhaps you could do, that would help protect that school, which has one fire hydrant and two very narrow ways out, and a lot of concerned parents?
And that specific area, I've worked one way, shape, or form through and gotten to know a lot of the neighbors and been involved with for quite some time. We have just recently, this past year, pushed our fuel breakdown using our fuels crew down in that saddle below the Kensington Elementary. I think we pushed that down another 200 feet. About 200 feet down to the boundary line. And it actually was pretty delightful to know and hear the concerns with that, and the way we're thinking and how we're going about what we're doing. That was part of our planned intentions, was to go in there. So when it was brought to our attention, we're like, oh, well, actually, that's already part of our work plan. The fuels crew is going to be getting in there this year. So that area has been treated down an additional 200 feet beyond what we were able to accomplish as part of that initial FEMA grant work that only had limited funds to be able to do things. So we weren't able to go so far down. But so I believe that the concerns have been mitigated to an extent that a fire coming up from the canyon would be a lot less impactful on that section of that fuel break along Kensington. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I hope this is quick. I'm concerned about the prompt detection of incipient fires. I think, I'm no fireman, but small fire is easier to deal with than waiting until you have a bigger fire. The Forest Service years ago put people up on towers on top of ridge tops with binoculars. They don't do that anymore. They use automated cameras, which are not going to sleep, and they work night and day. What measures do you have for quick detection of a fire wherever it occurs, whether it be in one of these treated areas or in the middle of nowhere? Is there some way of making sure that we don't wait too long before we discover there's a fire to deal with?
So we as an agency really do work with our collaborators and cooperators as far as the fire detection capabilities of, between the satellites, the alert wildfire cameras. So we have multiple alert wildfire cameras that we're not specifically operating those, but we do have those within park property that are located in strategic locations that are both funded by CAL FIRE as well as the PG&E cameras. And that alert wildfire detection system is actually quite impressive and amazing in its ability to detect fires and smoke and catch fires small. So, us as an agency, we're paying attention to that alert wildfire system. We're tied into that. So I would say that really is where the cutting edge is at this point, and it's run, from my understanding, on AI and algorithms at this point. It's not people sitting there looking at the cameras. It's a highly advanced fire detection system. And I wish I could brief you more on it, or if I knew more, but there's some new technology from the satellite detection that's really supposed to be a game changer that should be out fairly soon, but I don't know the specifics or details on that. That's great. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I was surprised to hear that you needed permits for a lot of the work, and I was just wondering whether the park needs permits for the cutting versus the burns. Who's granting those, and is that a problem getting those?
It's the reason that we show the permitted areas and speak to it in such depth is that it is a very time-consuming, laborious, and at times costly process to go through. The permitting for our wildfire hazard reduction and resource management plan, for instance, that process started back in 2010. We weren't actually able to do work under that permitting, and there was some litigation involved, but it took years and years. We really weren't able to start work under that, and I don't believe until 2017, 16. But the permitting, we're going through and working with our stewardship team, which we didn't really mention them so much during this presentation, but the work that we're doing is a district-wide effort. I can't imagine such a position or role that you're able to work with all the different departments and divisions in order to make this work happen. Our stewardship team helps us through that permitting with the wildlife regulatory agencies, because our fuels management and our fuels treatment work does have the potential for take of some of the listed species, both vegetative and snakes, mammalian, whatnot. So we have to be able to make sure that we're doing our work using the best practices. We have minimization and mitigation measures in place, monitors as required, as well as the methodologies that we use are going to minimize the impacts on those listed species that are within this area. And in order to do that, it does require a large lift, and we've placed aside mitigation, lands that are kind of set aside as I can't think of the word right now, sorry, but like kind of like a conservation plan type lands. And for burning, yes, we do need permits for that as well too. Primarily through the state, if it's in the state responsibility area with CAL FIRE, and then with the local air quality control district to make sure that the smoke impacts of our activities such as pile burning and broadcast burning are not negatively impacting any sensitive receptors or you as neighbors.
I'll say, just from some of the wildfire coalition work that some of the groups I've been sitting on, Senator Grayson, who is Contra Costa County, has been kind of convening the Contra Costa group, Senator Aragin, and then the East Bay Wildfire Coalition. We've kind of got our own group. But this permitting issue has definitely come up a number of times. I know the governor has taken some executive action to try and kind of relax some of the EQA exemptions. Senator Grayson's been leading an effort. So I think there's a lot more to do on the permitting, but there's awareness that that is a limitation that we need to look at when it comes to fire safety and fire prevention. Not everything can be stopped and slowed by the permit. We got to find a better way through it. So there are folks working on that at the state level, but we should continue to talk about it. It's important. So could we join me in thanking Chief McIntyre and Captain Neville for the time, for being so willing and generous with your time to answer all of our questions, to really provide us a lot of information. We will share the slides. If there are other questions, I know we didn't get every questions, please email me, bblackaby@berkeleyca.gov. I'll work them through with Elizabeth and the team, and we'd be happy to get them back to you. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being here, Board Member Echols for being here, Jen Braun for organizing all of us and bringing us all together. And then I just want to thank Lori and Hannah and my team and my office staff for helping with the event as well. So thank you so much. It's great to see everyone. Let's have snacks and we can converse more. Thank you, everybody.